I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Jack stood there in our living room, his eyes cold as winter stones, holding a suitcase I'd never seen before. "I never loved you, Rita. I just tolerated you for your parents' money. But now I'm rich. I don't need you anymore." 3 months earlier, I had been a different woman. A woman who still believed in the fairness of love, in the sanctity of marriage vows spoken 30 years ago. But that woman died the moment I understood the truth about the man I had shared my bed with for 3 decades. My name is Rita, and this is how my world collapsed and rebuilt itself in ways I never imagined possible. The story begins not with betrayal, but with earth under my fingernails and the scent of fresh hay. I was born to farmers, people whose hands told stories of honest work and whose hearts beat with the rhythm of seasons. My parents, God rest their souls, taught me that everything worthwhile required effort. "Nothing good comes easy, Rita," my father would say as we fed the chickens before dawn. "But everything earned with your own hands tastes sweeter." Those words would haunt me later, when I realized how little I had truly earned in my marriage. College was my parents' dream for me, not mine. "Rita, we've been talking," Dad said one evening, his weathered hands folded over his coffee cup. "Your mom and I think you should go to college." The city might as well have been Mars. Everything moved faster, spoke louder, demanded more than I knew how to give. But then there was Jack. I met him in my second year, and he was everything the farm boys back home weren't. Charming, confident, with a smile that seemed to promise adventures I'd only read about in books. "Life's too short to waste it working yourself to the bone," he'd say, lounging on the grass outside the library like he owned the world. "We should enjoy ourselves while we're young." I was 20 years old and desperately in love with the idea of being in love. Jack represented everything I thought I wanted: spontaneity, excitement, freedom from the endless cycle of chores and responsibilities that had defined my childhood. What I didn't understand then was that there's a difference between someone who chooses not to work hard and someone who simply cannot. When I brought Jack home to meet my parents, I watched my father's face carefully. Dad had a way of reading people that came from years of dealing with weather, livestock, and the harsh realities of farming. "He seems nice enough," Dad said after Jack's first visit, his voice carefully neutral. "But there's something I don't know." "Just be careful, Rita." I brushed off his concerns with the arrogance of youth. What did my old-fashioned father know about modern love? Jack was perfect, and we were going to have a perfect life together. My parents, bless their generous hearts, paid for our wedding. They even bought us an apartment in the city, furnished it, and sent us off with their blessing and their savings. "We want you to have a good start," Mom said, her eyes misty as she hugged me goodbye. "Promise me you'll be happy, sweetheart." "I promise, Mom. I promise I'll make you proud." Standing at that altar, exchanging vows and rings, I thought my life was set. I had a husband who loved me, a decent job in the city, and a future that stretched ahead like an endless summer day. The first crack in that perfect picture appeared so gradually I almost missed it. "Rita, do we have to go to your parents' farm this weekend?" Jack would whine every time I suggested a visit. "It smells like manure, and your dad always wants me to help with something." I'd sigh and try to reason with him. "They're my family, Jack, and they've done so much for us." Fine, he'd grumble, but I'm not shoveling any cow crap. I told myself it was just city boy squeamishness. After all, I'd grown up with those smells and chores. But looking back now, I wonder if that wasn't my first glimpse of the man Jack really was underneath all that charm. 2 years into our marriage, I got pregnant. I was over the moon, and my parents were ecstatic. A grandchild, Mom squealed over the phone. "Oh, Rita, we're so happy for you." Jack's reaction was less enthusiastic. "A kid already? I guess that's okay." I chalked it up to nerves. Surely he'd warm up to the idea of being a father. When Tommy was born, I fell in love all over again. This tiny person who was half of me and half of Jack, who represented the future we'd build together. But Jack, well, he tried. I'll give him that. But fatherhood didn't come naturally to him. "Can't you keep that kid quiet?" he'd complain when Tommy cried at night. "Some of us have to work in the morning." I'd bite my tongue and remind myself that we were both adjusting to parenthood. But deep down, a small voice wondered why Jack seemed to view our son as an inconvenience rather than a blessing. My parents continued to support us throughout those early years. They bought us a car, paid for vacations, sent money when things got tight. I was grateful, but Jack seemed to take it all for granted. "Of course they're helping us," he'd say with a shrug. "That's what parents do." No gratitude, no acknowledgement of their sacrifice. Just expectation, as if the world owed him comfort and ease. The visits to the farm became increasingly tense. "Your dad asked me to help fix the tractor again," Jack would grouse. "I'm not a mechanic, for Christ's sake." I'd watch my father patiently explaining each step while Jack grimaced and fumbled with the tools. Dad would be sweating and focused, treating the work as a collaboration, while Jack acted like he was being subjected to medieval torture. Then tragedy struck. Within a single, devastating year, both my parents passed away. I was shattered, drowning in grief for the two people who had loved me unconditionally, who had sacrificed so much to give me opportunities they'd never had. "They're gone, Jack," I sobbed into his shoulder. "I can't believe they're gone." He patted my back awkwardly and then said something that would echo in my mind for months afterward. "It'll be okay. At least they left us the farm. At least." As if my parents' death was somehow mitigated by what we'd inherit. The farm represented 4 generations of my family's sweat and dreams, and all Jack could think about was its monetary value. In the midst of my grief, Jack dropped a bombshell. "We should sell the farm," he said one night over dinner, his voice casual, as if he were suggesting we change TV channels. "We could buy a big house in the city, live like kings." I wanted to argue, to fight for my family's legacy, but I was exhausted, worn down by grief and the demands of motherhood, by the constant feeling that I was swimming upstream in my own marriage. Wasn't a wife supposed to support her husband's decisions? "Okay," I said quietly, "if you think it's best." And just like that, with a few signatures on legal papers, my family's history was sold to the highest bidder. The money went into our joint account, and Jack was like a child on Christmas morning. "We're set for life, Rita," he crowed, dancing around our kitchen. "No more slaving away at work. We can do whatever we want." I nodded and smiled, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest. This was what Jack wanted, and I was his wife. I had to support him, didn't I? Life after selling the farm was different. The money cushioned us nicely, allowing both of us to cut back to part-time work. For a while, it felt like we were living some kind of dream. But as the years passed, I began to notice disturbing patterns. Jack, who'd never been particularly motivated, seemed to lose all ambition entirely. He'd quit jobs at the drop of a hat, always with some excuse. That boss was a jerk, he'd say, or they expected too much. I'm not a slave, you know. Jack, we can't live off the farm money forever. I'd try to reason with him. We need to think about our future. He'd wave me off dismissively. Relax, Rita. We're set for life. Why work ourselves to death? Meanwhile, our son Tommy was growing into a remarkable young man. He graduated high school, then college, and before I knew it, he was working and living independently. I was proud of him, but I missed his presence in the house. With Tommy gone, the silence between Jack and me grew louder. One morning, flipping through the newspaper, a name caught my eye. There was an article about a successful concrete production plant owned by none other than Jack's Uncle Robert. Jack, I called out. Did you see this article about your Uncle Robert? The change in Jack's demeanor was instant and disturbing. His face darkened like a storm cloud. I don't want to hear about that old tyrant, he snapped. I knew bits and pieces of the story from what Jack had told me over the years. How his parents had died when he was young, leaving him in Robert's care. How Robert had been overbearing and controlling, trying to force Jack into the family business. He never listened to what I wanted, Jack had explained years ago. It was always about what he thought was best. So I left. Started my own life. Looking at Jack now, lounging in his bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon, I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to that story. Maybe it's time to make peace, I suggested gently. It's been years, Jack. People change. His reaction was explosive. Make peace with that control freak? No way in hell, Rita. Drop it. The vehemence in his voice, the raw anger that had clearly been simmering for decades, left me unsettled. There was so much resentment there, so much unresolved pain. It made me wonder what else Jack was carrying around, what other parts of himself he kept hidden even from his wife. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I overheard Jack on the phone. His voice was curt, dismissive. I am not interested in his life, and it does not concern me, he said sharply before hanging up. Who was that, honey? I asked, though something in his expression made me dread the answer. Hospital, Jack said, his face a mask of indifference. My uncle's sick. If he kicks the bucket, at least I'll finally get something out of him. I stared at him, shocked by his callousness. Jack, that's a terrible thing to say. He raised you. Yeah, and made my life hell, he snapped. I'm not going to see him. End of story. As I watched Jack settle back into his armchair, remote control in hand, something inside me crystallized. This wasn't the man I'd married, or maybe it was, and I'd just been too blind to see it. Without a word to Jack, I went to our bedroom and called Tommy. Hey, sweetie, I said when he picked up. How would you feel about meeting your great-uncle? An hour later, Tommy and I were walking through the sterile corridors of the hospital. My heart pounded as we approached the ICU, not knowing what we'd find or why I felt compelled to be there. Uncle Robert lay in a bed surrounded by beeping machines, looking small and fragile. Nothing like the tyrannical figure Jack had painted in his stories. When we introduced ourselves, his eyes filled with tears. "Rita, Tommy," he said, his voice weak but warm. "Oh, I've wanted to meet you for so long." Over the next hour, Robert told us his version of events. How he'd taken Jack in after the tragedy, raised him as his own son, loved him unconditionally. "I wanted him to have everything," Robert said, his voice cracking with emotion. "To carry on the family business, to have security, to understand the value of building something with your own hands. But Jack, it seemed, had different ideas. He said he didn't want the responsibility," Robert continued, shaking his head sadly. "Said he didn't want to work hard like I did, staying up nights worrying about employees, about contracts, about keeping the business alive." I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach as Robert's words painted a picture I recognized all too well. "Jack demanded I sell everything," Robert said, his voice growing weaker. "Wanted me to set him up with a monthly allowance, an apartment, a car. Said I owed him a carefree life because his parents died." I glanced at Tommy, seeing my own shock mirrored in his young face. "I told him that's not how life works," Robert went on. "That money and respect have to be earned. I begged him to stay, to learn the business, to let me teach him everything I knew. But he just got angry." The old man's voice broke as he continued. "He said he'd find a rich wife and never have to work a day in his life. Then he walked out, and I haven't seen him since." Sitting there in that hospital room, listening to Robert's story, memories from the past decade started flooding back like puzzle pieces finally falling into place. Jack had never held a job for long. He'd always chosen the easiest work available, called in sick frequently, took countless unnecessary days off. I'd attributed it to stress, to him being a free spirit, to anything but the truth that was now staring me in the face. "Life is for pleasure, Rita," he'd always said. "Why kill ourselves working when we could be enjoying life?" The sick realization washed over me like ice water. Jack hadn't married me for love. He'd married me for my family's money, for the comfortable life he thought I could provide. I wasn't his wife. I was his meal ticket. The rich bride he'd promised his uncle he'd find. Tears welled up in my eyes as the full weight of this betrayal settled on my shoulders. Our entire marriage, our family, the life we'd built together, it had all been constructed on a foundation of lies. "I'm so sorry," Robert said, his voice barely a whisper. "I wanted to leave something for you and Tommy, but there are complications. A new project I started, loans I took out. I'm afraid I've run out of time." "It's okay," I said, squeezing his frail hand. "We don't need anything from you. Just knowing the truth is enough." A few days later, the call came. Uncle Robert had passed away peacefully in his sleep. When I told Jack, his reaction made my blood run cold. "Finally," he exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face like oil on water. "Took the old bastard long enough." I stared at him in disgust and disbelief. "Jack, he was your uncle. He raised you. He loved you." He waved dismissively, already reaching for his phone. Yeah. "So when's the funeral? Do we need to go to that?" In the end, Jack didn't attend the funeral. Tommy and I organized a small, dignified affair that I hoped would have made Robert proud. While I was grieving for a man I'd barely known, but deeply respected, my husband was at home, gleefully calculating his newfound wealth. The factory's got to be worth at least $10 million. I heard him saying on the phone when I returned home. Can you believe it? I'm rich. I watched him strut around our house, boasting about his inheritance to anyone who would listen, and felt nothing but revulsion. This wasn't the man I thought I'd married. This was a stranger wearing my husband's face, and I was finally seeing him clearly for the first time in 30 years. Then Jack dropped the final bombshell. You know, Rita, he said one evening, his eyes cold and calculating. You're getting kind of old for me. I think I'm ready for an upgrade. The casual cruelty of his words hit me like a physical blow. Excuse me, he shrugged, not even bothering to look ashamed. You heard me. I'm rich now. I can do better. Over the following weeks, Jack's behavior became increasingly erratic and hurtful. He'd stay out late, coming home in the early hours reeking of alcohol and perfume. More than once, I spotted lipstick stains on his collar. Each time I confronted him, he'd brush me off with growing contempt. Mind your own business, he'd sneer. You should be grateful I come home at all. One morning, after another night of Jack stumbling in at dawn, I'd reached my breaking point. Where were you? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. Jack sneered, his bloodshot eyes narrowing with disdain. None of your damn business, Rita. You should be grateful I come back at all. Then, with a calculating look that chilled me to the bone, he asked, Say, how much is left from your parents' inheritance? We must have some savings, right? The sudden change of topic threw me off guard. What? Jack, we've spent it all. The accounts are empty. His face twisted into an ugly mask of disgust. Empty? You've got to be kidding me. He paced the room like a caged animal, muttering to himself. Then he turned back to me, his eyes cold as winter. Well, I guess that's it then. I'm done here. Done with you. Before I could respond, Tommy walked through the front door. Jack's demeanor changed instantly, like an actor stepping into a role. He plastered on a fake smile and approached our son. Tommy, my boy. Just the person I wanted to see. I need you to sign something for me. He produced a document from his pocket, thrusting it at Tommy. It's just a formality. You're renouncing any claim to Uncle Robert's estate. Since there's no will, it all comes to me anyway. Tommy glanced at me, confusion clear on his face. After my subtle nod, he signed the paper without hesitation. Jack's grin was triumphant as he snatched back the document. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, he turned back to me. All pretense was gone, replaced by a coldness I'd never seen before. I want a divorce, he announced, his voice flat and final. I never loved you, Rita. I just tolerated you for your parents' money. But now I'm rich. I don't need you anymore. And there we were, back to that moment that would divide my life into before and after. The moment when 30 years of marriage were reduced to a suitcase and a door slamming shut. I stood there frozen, trying to process what had just happened. It felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Mom? Tommy's voice was soft, concerned. Mom, are you okay? I turned to my son, my rock, my anchor in this storm, and felt the dam break. Tears streamed down my face as Tommy wrapped his arms around me. It's okay, Mom, he murmured, holding me tight. We'll get through this. You're stronger than you know. As I clung to my son, sobbing into his shoulder, I marveled at the man he'd become. Kind, compassionate, everything his father wasn't. You're the best thing he ever did, I whispered to Tommy, the only good thing to come out of this marriage. The weeks following Jack's departure were a blur of paperwork, lawyers, and the strange sensation of learning to be alone after 3 decades of marriage. Jack seemed determined to flaunt his new life in my face, posting endless photos on social media of Uncle Robert's mansion and his lifestyle upgrade. Then came the photos of her. Candy, a blonde, beautiful girl who couldn't have been much older than Tommy. In one particularly cruel post, Jack had his arm around her, both of them grinning at the camera. The caption made my stomach churn. Meet my fiancée, Candy. Upgrade complete. The phone calls started immediately. Friends, acquaintances, even Tommy's old school teachers, all wanting to know what was happening. I couldn't take the humiliation, the constant reminders of Jack's betrayal. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Jack and asked to meet. The day arrived, and I waited at our old favorite cafe, divorce papers in hand. Jack swaggered in with Candy on his arm, her face caked with makeup, giggling at something he whispered in her ear. Well, well, Jack sneered, pulling out a chair for his young companion. If it isn't the old ball and chain. Candy, honey, meet Rita, the starter wife. Candy gave me a pitying look that made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. I have the divorce papers here, I said, sliding them across the table. I'm not asking for much. Just the house. You can keep everything else. To my surprise, he picked up the pen without argument. Fine. Have your little house. I've got bigger and better things now. He scrawled his signature across the documents, then turned to Candy with sickening sweetness. Now I can finally be with someone I truly love. Someone worthy of me. I gathered the papers, my hands trembling slightly. As I walked out of that cafe, I heard Jack's mocking laughter behind me. But I didn't look back. I had what I came for. Life has a funny way of serving up justice when you least expect it. For me, it came in the form of a newspaper headline: Local business tycoon's empire crumbles, nephew left with massive debt. It turned out that Uncle Robert had taken out an enormous loan just before his death, hoping to expand the business into new markets. The project he'd mentioned during our hospital visit, his final gamble to build something even greater for future generations. But the timing was wrong, and the debt was catastrophic. I watched from afar as Jack's new life crumbled around him. He sold the factory, the mansion, the cars, everything, and still owed nearly $1 million. The cherry on top of this karmic sundae, his young bride Candy packed her bags and left the moment she realized Jack wasn't the wealthy catch she thought he was. Then one rainy evening there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Jack standing there, looking nothing like the smug, wealthy man who'd walked out on me months earlier. He was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Rita," he said, his voice cracking. "I've been such a fool. I see that now. Please, can we talk?" Against my better judgment, I let him in. For the next hour, I listened as Jack poured out his heart, telling me how he'd lost everything, how he'd realized what truly mattered in life. "I was wrong, Rita," he said, his eyes pleading. "So wrong. But I see now that you were the only one who ever truly cared for me. The only one I've ever really loved." Then, to my utter disbelief, Jack got down on one knee. He produced a small velvet box from his pocket. "Rita, please, give me another chance. Marry me again. Together we can overcome anything. For a moment, I was speechless. Then I did something that surprised even me. I laughed. It started as a small chuckle and grew into full-blown, tears streaming down my face laughter. Jack's face fell. What's so funny? When I finally caught my breath, I looked him straight in the eye. Oh, Jack, did you really think it would be that easy? That you could treat me like garbage, throw me away like yesterday's newspaper, and then come crawling back when things got tough? His expression darkened, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the old Jack. Now listen here, he snarled, jumping to his feet. This is my house too. I have rights. I calmly walked to the drawer where I kept our divorce papers. I pulled them out and showed him his own signature. No, Jack, you don't. You signed away any claim to this house. It's mine now. Get out, or I'll call the cops. For a moment, I thought he might try to argue further, but something in my expression must have told him I meant business. Without another word, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, I called Tommy and told him everything. My wonderful son was supportive as always. You did the right thing, Mom, he said. I'm proud of you. Those words meant more to me than he could ever know. In the weeks that followed, I made some big decisions. The house, with all its memories both good and bad, felt too large for just me. So I sold it, using the money to buy a cozy apartment in a vibrant neighborhood I'd always loved. At 62, I'm discovering that life is just beginning. I've started traveling, seeing all the places Jack always promised we'd visit but never did. I've taken up painting, joined a book club, even tried my hand at salsa dancing. Every now and then, I catch a glimpse of Jack around town. He looks older now, worn down by his mistakes and misfortunes. Sometimes I feel a twinge of something, not quite pity, not quite sadness, but a recognition of what we both lost along the way. Life didn't turn out the way I expected when I was that young farm girl dreaming of adventure. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. Because now, for the first time in a very long time, I'm truly, completely, happily myself.